This is an environmental Sunday on electric vehicles. Thank you all for coming. This is, we have a panel today. Anna Vanderspek, is it Vanderspek? Who is on the screen, coming from the Green Energy Consumers Alliance. We have Nate Ranichin.
Yes.
Who's from Fairfield Kia in Keene, and Brian Summer, who lives in Shelburne Falls, and who is an EV driver. So thank you all. I have to remember the exits, emergency exits are through that door, and the front, there are bathrooms down this hall if you need bathrooms. Okay, so Tupper is going to be the MC.
I will try to be the MC. Welcome, everybody. Thank you to the panel. I think what I'm going to do is ask each of you to introduce yourselves in a little more detail, and then at that time, see if you have anything which you would like to say to get us started. And then we have a whole series of questions, and I know others in the audience here have questions also. So Anna, if you don't mind, can you start off and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and anything that you think would be useful to start us off?
Yes, okay. I'm Brian Summer. I live in Shelburne Falls, probably 25 years live there, and run a small business. I got a solar system put on the house in 2016. And when I did that, they said, well, the one you're asking to put on is bigger than we allow for your history of use. And I said, well, I'm planning to get an electric car. Okay, then we'll give you a waiver on the size and we'll let you put on a little bigger one. So it's been 7 years until we finally got the car. But we have a big balance with the electric company, so we'll be riding for free for a while. And we don't know yet whether the system handles the car, plus the mini split heat pump and the hybrid water heater and the lights and all of that. We'll find that out probably by a year from now. We'll know if the system is big enough to generate the power for all those needs. So we just got that car in the end of November, I think it was, or early December. So we're still in the learning curve of getting comfortable on a day-to-day basis, but it's going along pretty well at this point, so I'll leave it there.
Well, let's go to Anna. Anna, can you hear me?
I can.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting us and then also for allowing me to be virtual today. My name is Anna and I work for a nonprofit called Green Energy Consumers Alliance. It's a statewide nonprofit and our mission is to empower consumers and communities to make clean energy choices, basically. So we run different programs and services that help people access various clean energy technologies, including electric vehicles. And we also do statewide public advocacy for clean energy policies. So I live firmly in our transportation space, so we run a program called Drive Green that educates consumers about the benefits and also the complications or new things with electric cars. So we do a lot of ride and drive events and webinars and things like that, and we also have a shopping tool that helps people understand what models are available, what the prices are, what the incentives are, how to install charging with help from your utility, and all of that. So I'm looking forward to the questions today.
All right. Thank you. Sir.
I'm Nathan. I'm a salesperson at Fairfield Kia. We do have some of the best electric vehicles on the market right now. That's pretty much all I got.
There's a plug if I've ever heard one.
There it is.
Very good. Anna, let me ask you for a kind of overview on the regulatory and incentive side of electric vehicles. Do you see what I mean? I think it would be good for people to know where we are in terms of the control of rates that they have to pay for the electricity, and where we are incentives to buy an electric vehicle.
Okay, I'm going to repeat back the question every time to make sure I understood it correctly. So the question is sort of where are we in the big scheme of things, and what are the incentives that are available? Is that correct?
Yes, that's good. Let's start with the incentive side.
Okay, so I will give the Cliff Notes version of the incentives, and then we can go into more detail if you're interested, because as I'm sure any salesperson from a dealership will know, it's very complicated now. So there is a federal tax credit that is available to you if you purchase a new or used electric vehicle. There are really complicated eligibility requirements for new vehicles, so rather than run through what those are, I would say there's a list on fueleconomy.gov that tells you exactly which vehicle models are eligible for the federal tax credit. It's up to $7,500, so it's either $7,500 or $3,750 depending on the vehicle. And to capture it, you have to go to a dealership that has registered with the IRS, because the IRS is a clean energy portal now. So if you're in the market and you're talking to a dealership, ask, are you registered with the IRS? If they say yes, then they can check what the vehicle, the specific car that you're looking at, what it qualifies for through that portal. And then you can claim that tax credit either as basically cash on the hood at the point of sale, or you can wait when you file your taxes and file a specific form to claim it at that time. So for new vehicles, it's up to $7,500. You have to go through an IRS registered dealership. For used vehicles, it's up to $4,000 or 30% of the sales price. Again, you want to go to an IRS registered dealership so they can tell you if the particular used car you're looking at qualifies. There are more rules there about your income and the price of the car that I'm happy to go into, but for now, Cliff Notes version, $7,500 up to for federal new and $4,000 up to for federal used. And then the state of Massachusetts runs a direct rebate program called More EV that has lots of sub-programs, but basically you can get $3,500 for the purchase or lease of a new or used electric vehicle if the vehicle meets the eligibility requirements, and you do too for used. Then there's an additional rebate if you're low income, and an additional rebate if you're trading in a really old gas-powered car. So you can stack the incentives from the federal government on top of the incentives from the state government from both new and used vehicles to really substantially bring the price down depending on what vehicle you're looking at.
Well, I'd be interested to hear what each of the panelists has to say about what it costs to charge an electric car. And maybe beginning with you, Anna, is there a regulatory process underway now that affects that? Or is it stabilized? Or where do we stand on that?
So the question is, how do you determine the cost to charge, and is there a regulatory process to determine that? Was that the question?
Well, I guess I'm not clear on what happens at a charging station. If you're at your house, you're paying whatever your house rates are. But if you're at a charging station, what governs how much they charge?
So there is no current regulatory process on what charging providers for public charging stations, what they can charge. So it's a little bit of the Wild West. Some public charging stations are free, some you have to pay per kilowatt hour, some you have to pay per parking, some you have to pay by the hour. There's different websites and apps that can help you find charging stations, and I'm sure our EV driver can speak to this as well. What I will say is that right now, in the climate law that's before the legislature in Massachusetts, for the first time there's an effort to actually give a state agency authority to check that charging stations are working and make a database of all of this. So right now, in one of the climate laws that's being considered, there is language that would give the Operational Services Division, I believe it is, the authority to make a list of all the public charging stations and go and inspect them and make sure they're working, and have a system for actually doing that and funding to actually test those charging stations. So that is sort of one step towards making that playing field a little bit more even and a little bit more regulated, but right now, if you're a public charging station owner, you can set pricing however you want as long as it's clear how you're setting the pricing to the customer.
But doesn't the charging station have to pay the electric company for the electricity? And is that price governed by the state?
I'm sorry, could I ask you who is in the middle of the screen, can you repeat that question? Because I think I hear it clear when it's from the middle. I'm so sorry.
Right. I'm just curious as to whether the state governs the prices that the charging station has to pay to the electric company for the electricity that they sell to the cars.
Yes, so that is in the realm of the Department of Public Utilities. So the rates that you as a site owner, whether you're talking about what you're paying for at your home or if you're a supermarket or a mall that has installed charging stations, the rate you pay is determined by a process. If we're talking about National Grid, Eversource, and Unitil service territory across the state, those are the investor-owned utilities. That process is the utilities propose rates to the Department of Public Utilities with the DPU. The DPU does a whole lot of math to double check their work and basically approves those rates. So those rates are regulated. Which rates change how frequently varies a little bit. So there's the distribution or delivery component of your bill, and there's the supply component of the bill. The supply component changes every 6 months, and the utilities have to propose that in rate cases, and the DPU approves or denies. And then the delivery charges change on a different schedule. But the long story short, those charges are approved by the Department of Public Utilities.
Well, let's see what the experience is. Nate and Brian, what do you find that you're paying for electricity for charging? Is it a lot? Is it little? Is it dirt cheap or what?
I know that in the winter, the panels don't produce enough, so we do have to buy some in the winter, and so we get charged, I think at this point it's 14.5 cents a kilowatt hour. That definitely went up. I'm part of the thing that the Franklin County, the FERCog, the towns have been buying in bulk, and if you remember that as a household, then you get a lower rate on a contract, and that's worked pretty well. And I signed up to get the green option of that, which means the power is generated by wind power, probably down in Texas. Of course, those electrons don't end up going into my house, perhaps, but I am supporting the green option. As far as how much, I'm trying to find out. I think this month we'll cross the line and we'll make more than we buy, and therefore I don't buy anything, and then they're buying from me or putting it on my credit. So it's always important when I cross that line, and I think it's this month.
Well, Nate, what do you tell your customers? Are these electric cars more expensive to drive or less expensive than a gasoline car?
They are more expensive to drive. To offset the cost of an electric vehicle, let's say my EV6, to get a vehicle that was comparable to it is about $30,000 cheaper. So to make up that, you'd have to own that vehicle for a really long time to make up that cost. The overall cost, the EV does cost more in the long run because you have to hold it for a longer time. That's the truth.
And that's because the car itself is more expensive.
Correct.
I'm asking you, that's good information, but I'm asking you also to run the car, to pay for the electricity as opposed to paying for the gas, which is cheaper per mile.
Cheaper per mile would be the electric vehicle. My last vehicle I sold, because technology is moving so quickly, I told my customer to download the EVgo, the ChargePoint USA app, and also start downloading the Tesla app, because you can monitor where the prices are and find the best charging stations. Everything's switching over to Tesla chargers right now. He's going to own the market. So all that electricity that he's giving out to us, he can dictate what price it is. There's no more free market that us are going to be used to. one person controls our energy source and how we use our energy.
Well, that sounds kind of scary. Is the cost of charging in a charging station eventually going to go way up, do you think?
Does gas go up?
Seems to sometimes.
And that's the same thing that's going to happen.
Well, and you think that the electric cost per mile is going to stay below the gas cost per mile?
I think it will slowly start to creep up there. I've been telling my customers to lease vehicles. The reason to lease the electric vehicles, I can put them back on the market when the lease is over and resell it. That puts more electric vehicles on the market. There's more of a product on there. Of course, to run that product, we can charge what we want for it. So the electric companies can up the rates whenever they feel like it. We have an energy crisis. That's the truth. We're not solving an issue right now. We're just putting a Band-Aid over it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've
Can
heard
I
that.
jump in on the electricity costs piece? So, two things I want to make clear for folks who are maybe newer to the concept of electric vehicles. One, if you can charge at home, that is the best option. That is the cheapest option, it's the most convenient option. So when we're talking about the public charging stations, there's always, you're paying a little bit of a premium for the service, for the amenity basically. And there's two types of charging in public. There's the level 2 charging, which is you add like 20 to 30 miles per hour spent charging. And then there's the DC fast charging. Those are the super high powered ones you'll use on road trips. Those definitely have an extra cost because of the fact that they're so fast. You're paying a little bit for that. But if you charge at home, you should see your electric bill go up by less than your gas bill goes down. And so that's one thing that I want to say. The second thing is, in terms of electricity costs looking forward from now to 2050, the state of Massachusetts is one of very few states who are really taking a look at this. There's a whole process right now at the Department of Public Utilities called grid modernization broadly, but it's basically the utilities and the DPU and other state agencies going, okay, if we want to electrify all these vehicles, if we want to electrify heating, if we want to bring on more solar and wind and storage, how are we going to do that? What's it going to cost? And what is it going to look like? So there is attention being paid to that. And then the last thing I want to say is that the electric utilities right now are a little bit behind compared to other parts of the country, but we're gonna make them catch up on an idea called time varying rates or managed charging, where basically if you're an electric vehicle driver and you charge when demand is low, which is mostly overnight, you might pay a lower price per kilowatt hour, and that is good for you, the driver, because it lowers your fuel costs, but it's actually good for everybody, all ratepayers, even if you don't drive an electric vehicle, because it smooths out demand and supply on the electric grid. So those things are coming, they're kind of in place in some places, but the state is working on making them more widespread in the next couple of years.
The another side of this coin is, never mind the cost, some people just like driving electric cars, like, for instance, me. I think they're fun. Brian, do you have any comment on that?
I like driving it, actually. One thing that's awesome is they don't shift. The electric motor goes faster or slower, but it's just a continuous thing. And when you're not used to that, you're used to it clunking or shifting or lugging down or, whatever. No, it doesn't do that. And that's really nice when it's quiet. You have to watch out for pedestrians that don't hear you a little bit. I think that's an issue a little bit, but I really do like driving it. Has a heated steering wheel and heated seats, so you're trying to heat the person, not the space you're in, to save some energy. A lot of things you have to adapt to that are different, but I really do like it. My wife likes it a lot. So one thing I wanted to mention that goes along with rates and all this and modernization of the grid, people who have solar on the roof like I do, I'm not paying gas taxes. So the roads are falling apart maybe because as more and more people have their own charging, they're not going to pay gas taxes. So we're going to have to maybe charge people who have EVs and solar at home some kind of fee. I don't know, but there's going to have to be some adjustment, I think. Seems fair.
So you want taxes to go up? Gotcha.
Governor Healy has put together a task force on transportation funding, and this is one of the issues that they're going to be tackling. So there's a whole bunch of people on it. Supposedly by the end of the year they'll issue a report, but the Secretary of Transportation, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, has been really clear that they want to really look at this and not kick that can down the road. So we'll see. So it'll be looking at both what are we going to do about gas tax revenue, the gas tax which has not been indexed to inflation for decades, but also how do we pay for public transportation versus roads and bridges and all of that.
Yes.
Just to comment on this, I was reading that some states are addressing this, and I believe Montana is one of them. And what they're doing is, if you own an EV and it's time to re-register your car, they hit you with a bill that is the gas tax you would have paid had it not been electric. And so you might register your gas-powered car for $75, but you might need to pay $700 to register your EV. Now, Montana is a state that is really supportive of fossil fuels, but that's what some states are reacting to, which that's going to be decided, I think, politically.
Can you repeat that?
DJ is saying that states are looking at that, and they're doing it as part of the registration process.
Registration of the car.
So they're sending you a fee. Montana is sending a fee that it compensates for the difference in taxes that you would have paid if you were buying gas versus an EV. And if we can keep the questions until we finish the discussion, that will be super. Thank you, and I didn't say that ahead of time.
Well, I'm not at all sure we'll know when we're finished the discussion. One of the issues that we thought people here would like to hear addressed is this continuing talk about the environmental impact of building these cars, and particularly the batteries. And I'm sure that Anna is up on that, but I thought it would be fun to ask Nate what he tells customers who say, why would I want to do this? These batteries are just destroying the environment. Did you hear me?
I did hear you.
Okay.
And I'm pausing because I'm going to give my honest answer. Yeah, you're not saving the environment by buying an EV vehicle. It's again, the amount of fuel that goes to get the lithium, the amount of work it takes to get lithium to China, to get the cobalt, the nickel, all those rare metals. In that whole process, you could have built 7 plug-in hybrids or 10 hybrid vehicles for one EV. Think about that. We are destroying it for a quick band-aid. This is the only plan that we have, but we're just throwing things at it, passing laws, raising taxes, doing what we can do for our band-aid. We need a permanent fix. And I believe that this old EV technology is not it. Companies right now like Samsung, Panasonic, they're all looking at graphene batteries. Honda, Toyota are looking at hydrogen technology. Just to let everyone know, Shell had a partnership with Toyota for hydrogen technology to charge their vehicles. Well, as of this month, they've turned off all their hydrogen stations in the state of California. I don't know what that means for us. I don't know if that means that hydrogen is not in the future, but EVs and the way that we get our lithium is not the correct way to solve this issue. We do have an energy crisis, and we need to figure it out quickly. And that's what it's
I have a slightly different perspective on that, but I'm curious what is the solution then? I'm curious what is your vision for a zero carbon?
My personal would be hydrogen. We have a water crisis in this country right now. Hydrogen produces water. We can solve two issues, energy and water right then and there. But we're not a country of solutions. We just keep throwing band-aids at it, and that's the problem. If we want to fix it, we as a country need to work together, and we're don't. That's the problem. We keep saying, throw tax at us, let's do this, let's do this. Let's control the consumer and tell the consumer how to do things. We like choices. That's what made us America.
Anna, I imagine that you do have a different perspective. What can you tell us about the technologies that Nate was just referring to?
And was the question, what can I say about technologies and how I think this transition should work?
Right, I've heard a lot about hydrogen. Is that, in your view, a viable alternate technology?
Not for passenger vehicles, in my view, and I can explain why. So I will frame this all in every climate agreement basically that is out there says we need to reach net zero emissions by 2050, which basically means whatever carbon emissions we're producing, we have to somehow magically suck out of the atmosphere again. And I will set aside the conversation about carbon capture and storage. That's complicated. What's very, very clear is we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions now. Hydrogen is cool in that it can refuel quickly. So instead of waiting for a battery to charge, you can just put hydrogen into a tank. And it's very lightweight. So if you're looking at heavy-duty trucks, maybe even aviation, shipping, those are applications where hydrogen might make sense. For passenger vehicles, I don't think it makes sense for a couple of reasons. One is that building a hydrogen refueling station is really, really expensive. There's one in all of New England right now, as opposed to the fact that everybody's got a plug, well, not everybody, but if you're lucky enough to live in a building that has a driveway, electricity is easier to do. The biggest issue that I have with hydrogen is that, yes, it produces water, but to get it, you first have to break hydrogen atoms out of other molecules, and that takes an enormous amount of energy. And right now, most of the hydrogen that we use is a byproduct of fossil fuel combustion. And so we might have it's called brown hydrogen or gray hydrogen, whatever you want to call it. But basically, you've got a big fossil fuel power plant, and you're using some of the energy to break apart molecules so that you have hydrogen fuel, and then you can put that hydrogen fuel into a vehicle, and it produces water when it's done. If we want to take carbon out of the equation completely and make green hydrogen, we're going to have to use wind, solar, what have you, renewable sources to do that. And the process of using a wind turbine, for example, I'm simplifying on purpose, but using a bunch of wind turbines to break up molecules, to put the hydrogen into a vehicle, to drive the vehicle, has more efficiency losses than batteries. So what I think hydrogen would be good for is those really, really challenging to electrify sectors. Heavy-duty shipping, aviation, big old trucks that need to get across the country. There, I think it might make more sense, but for passenger vehicles, there's lots of ramifications and externalities to take into account. But to come back to the earlier question about lithium mining and all of that, it is absolutely true that all types of mining are awful. There is no environmentally sound mining facility of any metal or ore that I've ever heard of. So there's no perfect ideal solution here. The Union of Concerned Scientists has done some good work about the greenhouse gas effects of mining and battery production. So you can see, yes, for the production of the vehicle, there is a bump up in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, but over the life of the vehicle, the total greenhouse gas emissions are much lower. That is not to negate all of the environmental and social consequences of mining, but it's the same minerals that are in the laptop that I'm using to talk to you right now that's in all our cell phones. So we have to do this clean energy transition at the same time as cleaning up our supply chains for all sorts of products. So that is my response to that, because I worry about us not moving forward because there's not a perfect solution, when meanwhile there's all this fossil fuel mining, drilling everywhere that's harming people too. So it's a very tricky conversation, but I like data, so I point to things like the Union of Concerned Scientists.
Anna, are you aware of any other technology that could replace the internal combustion engine, apart from batteries?
Walking, biking, trains, and buses are my favorite answers to that, which of course gets us into a land use and housing conversation, which is a whole other conversation. The one thing that everybody in the EV space talks about is the holy grail, or solid-state batteries, which is kind of like nuclear fusion, in that it's been 30 years away been 10 years away for 30 years kind of thing. The idea of a solid-state battery is that you get rid of the need for a liquid in there, makes sense. But those batteries, in theory, would be much more lightweight, much less prone to thermal runaway, which is basically if one of the cells breaks, that expands and causes a problem for the whole battery. Toyota is saying that it's close to production, or closer than any of the other automakers on that. I'm kind of in the I'll believe it when I see it stage for solid-state batteries, but that's the holy grail that everybody in the market talks about, because it would reduce the need for a lot of these things that have problems associated with them.
If any of the other panelists have anything to add at this point to anything we've talked about, it would be a good time. Otherwise, I'll open it up for any questions in the audience. You gentlemen have anything further at this point?
Well, I did a little looking to see what was going on in Germany. They're selling about 25% of the new vehicle sales right now are EVs, and they're projecting there are going to be some stress and strain on their grid, but they're really focused on working to decarbonize and electrify in a way that will allow the transition to more and more EVs. So I think the United States, we have our issues with how we do things, but if we look to countries in Europe, even China has got more EVs coming onto the roads than we do. So we might be able to learn from looking abroad.
All right. Any questions? Let's start all the way at the back.
Oh, right. It's a self-insert.
No.
Oh.
Behind, even farther back.
If you've covered this already, my apologies, but is it thought that if, let's say, we do all transition to EV vehicles, how far does that get us towards the climate goal around emissions?
That's a good question.
Could someone repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah, she asked if we, I guess the question is, if we go totally electric vehicle, how far does that go towards solving our overall climate issue? Is that right?
Yes, specifically regarding emissions, yes.
I can say, I'm sorry if I'm stepping on anybody's toes who's trying to speak. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions if you look at the sectors in Massachusetts. We don't have a whole lot of heavy industry. I think nationally it's the largest sector as well. So if you look at Massachusetts' greenhouse gas emissions over the last 30 years, we're doing a relatively good job of cleaning up the electric grid, but transportation and heating are the really big nuts to crack that we have to crack in the coming decades. So we need to bring transportation emissions down to zero. I think electric vehicles are part of that. Making sure there's more walking, biking, and public transit is another big part of that. But the two together are the tools that we have at our disposal to bring that down to zero.
Can you talk about that in terms of percentages?
Yes, I can even, if you give me a moment, I can find you a graph of the emissions from the state of Massachusetts, and I can put that on the screen. It might take me a minute to find the right one, but if anybody else wants to respond to that question while I poke around for the right graph.
We're talking about emissions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We're gonna feel very strange talking into this. We're talking about emissions. I've been driving all EVs for 4 years. Pre-owned certified cars, not big fancy cars. And boy, have I learned a lot. But here's what I've learned about emissions. And I drove a school bus for over 20 years ago. So I'm used to a lot of noxious fumes. When I come to a stop sign, or if I'm in traffic, in some stopped position or slowed position, I keep a mask in my car to wear. I am now so, you know, the noxious fumes that I've breathed for so many years, now I can really feel them and the effect of them. And the other thing is when I get out of my car, remember I've been driving full EVs for 4 years. Little ones, 88-mile range, 161 range. When I get out of my car, I look at the ground. Not that I didn't look at it before when I was a driver ed teacher. Then I was talking about leakage, oils and oil. Now I look at the ground and I think, oh my gosh, what have I done to my environment all these years? It is horrible to get out of a nice, clean, I'm going to say nice, clean running EV. That's my opinion. And walk and try and step over all of the stuff on the ground and think about my past years. So that's what I think about emissions both here and there.
I've been reading recently about the tires, and because EVs are heavier, that there is more particulate matter from tires. Is that, what are, no, does anyone have any comments on that?
All right, so tires. They are designed differently for EVs. They're really quiet. Tires are loud. The high end brands like Volvo, Mercedes, Lexus, and some of the other ones, BMW, they're using foam-filled tires to keep down that road noise. All right, so those tires are built a lot different. You just can't slap on, you know, a universal tire on it. You have to make sure it's for an EV at that point because it has to hold up that weight. EV tires only last about, I want to say 30 to 40,000 miles. It's about 20,000 miles less than the average tire.
One related question I think that Ella was getting at is whether EV cars generate more pollution from their tires than internal combustion cars. Have you ever heard that?
So this is an active conversation where I'm still trying to find more data to look at this, but the concern with EVs and tires is that because the vehicles are heavier, the friction of the tires against the road produces more particulate matter, which are very, very, very small pieces of stuff that get into our lungs and then our bloodstreams and cause public health harms. I have seen some evidence that EVs produce more from the friction between the tires and the road, but it's also true that EVs produce a lot less because there's no combustion happening. And so I haven't seen a lot of data on like the comparison of the plus on one side and the minus on the other and what's the net benefit. What I will say is that because a battery electric vehicle driving around is not combusting fuel, there's no tailpipe emissions. So we talked about greenhouse gas emissions, we talked about particulate matter, but there's all sorts of other nasty stuff that comes out of gas cars' pipes. And so the American Lung Association is a big proponent of electrification. They have done lots of studies measuring out what the public health impacts would be of electrifying fleets faster. So that's another resource I would point you to if you're curious about sort of the public health impacts of EVs, that the ALA is a big proponent of this and has done a lot of work on that front.
Did you say they're trying to design more EV fleets? Is that what you just said?
I don't mean commercial fleets, I just mean the fleet of vehicles that's on the road in general.
Okay.
They've published a couple reports that are called something Driving to Healthy Air or something like that. I can find them and share the link. But they're a big proponent of some of the regulations that would make automakers progressively make vehicles more efficient and also make the vehicles that they produce electric. So whoever I should send things to after this event, I can send some resources over.
Yes, I guess my question has to do around the batteries on EVs. How many batteries does an EV go through over its life? And what happens to those spent batteries? And how does that affect the environment?
So, to answer your question, there is not actually. Oh, the question is the lifespan of the battery, and what do we do? How many times do we have to replace the battery?
Thank you.
All right. First of all, a couple of the CEOs that used to work with Tesla are now in charge of a company that recycles 90% of those batteries. From your cell phones to the dual battery packs to the vapes that everyone uses. They're using all that to recycle. Batteries are expensive. For example, in the Ioniq 6, sorry about that Honda makes. Two customers had an issue out in Canada, and it cost $3,000 more than what the car was originally costing. So the insurance companies told it out. It was like $66,000 for a new battery. Yes.
So, is it okay if I jump in? I don't ever want to, if people are about to say. So, for a consumer who's worried about the batteries are generally warranted for 8 years or 100,000 miles. I'm sure you can correct me if that's wrong, but that's what I've heard. On the recycling front, there are some big startups that are getting a lot of funding, like Redwood Materials, which I think is the one that you're referring to do a lot of this recycling. But there are other things at play that I think should shape this market in the coming years. I think sometimes we have to recognize that we really are at the beginning of this transition. But there are incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act. So part of the crazy complicated eligibility requirements for the federal tax credit is, are any of the minerals in the battery recycled? If yes, then it has a higher chance of being eligible. There's tons of funding to build recycling plants for batteries. And then there's things in regulations like the Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulations, which are in place in Massachusetts and other states that will increase the number of electric vehicles on our roads, that are requiring manufacturers to literally put labels on their batteries to say, this is the chemistry that's in here, this is how it's built, that will make that recycling much easier in the future. Sometimes this is called a battery passport, but basically it will force a level of standardization, at least of communicating what's in the battery, that should make that industry build up easier in the coming years.
There is an industry that is just beginning, which is using the older batteries from cars, basically because they're large modules that are usable. So for example, you have an EV, perhaps it had a 300-mile reach originally, but now the battery is aged and it's only getting 180 miles, and that's not good enough for your life, so you want to buy a new battery. Companies will buy that old battery because things like wind power and solar are only available when the wind is blowing and the light is out. And so companies will use the electricity from these greener solutions to charge the old battery. They don't care that it only gets 180 miles because they'll charge it to the 60% capacity that it has and store it so that they can release it when the demand is higher. And so it helps with the load level. And that's one of the expensive parts of the electric generation, is to have enough electric power when people want it, and then come up with a way of storing it when they don't want it so you can use it. So that's one of the uses for the older electric batteries. And eventually, we're going to have to face the recycling issue. Can we get the materials back out of the battery that were put into it to make a new battery? And that's often a challenge. I had another question about electric vehicles, and that is, internal combustion engines are using water coolants, part of which is ethylene glycol, which is toxic. To what extent do you have to cool an electric vehicle?
To what extent do you have to cool an electric vehicle? There's a lot that goes in there. There's cooling systems all within the system. The electric vehicle I took right now is also air-cooled with water cooling systems throughout the battery to make sure that it doesn't have a runaway, it stays at the optimal temperature. That's just not just cooling it, but we also have to heat the battery in the wintertime to make sure that's at the right optimal temperature. Kia's pioneered that platform because they've understood how it works. It's very expensive if you depressurize that system. I'll let you know that because a technician of ours accidentally did that. It takes about 8 hours to recharge. Has to be pressurized at the right temperature, the right flow, everything has to be just right.
And then it's charged. You don't have to recharge that system as often as you have to.
You don't ever have to recharge it because like our blood, it just keeps pumping and pumping and pumping.
Right, so it's not like putting coolant into your...
No, not like that at all. You have to add washer fluid and brake fluid though. Don't forget to do that. Okay?
Hey, I'm curious what kind of research is going into biomimicry when it comes to transportation. I know that for the medical field and some, I believe wind power, there's research in biomimicry to make the technology more efficient. And I know that before we had internal combustion engines, we had horses. So how are we looking at the efficiency of the natural world as we move this conversation forward with transportation?
That was a fascinating question. Anna, you was asking about biomimicry. Does that mean anything to you? How much are we...
Could you say the word again?
Biomimicry.
Biomimicry.
Like the Flintstones, he wants me to use my feet to push the
He's
vehicle.
asking how much are we looking to the natural world to solve our energy problems and our climate problems. Is that a fair summary of what you were asking?
Yeah, looking at the efficiencies of natural bodies and trying to translate that into technology.
Translating human energy into electric energy.
Oh, translating human energy
Yeah,
and natural bodies.
I have not heard of that beyond like a bike.
correct.
I have heard really cool applications of EVs in places that take advantage of potential energy. So there are examples of heavy-duty electric vehicle trucks being used in mines where at the top they're loaded with whatever is being mined. They go down the hill and use regenerative braking to basically capture that energy, put it back into the battery, and then make it back up the hill once the weight has been unloaded based on the electricity that they captured with the regenerative braking on the way down. That's just a random cool fun fact, but is what comes to mind with the question.
I think I've heard in Scandinavia that they're taking heat and energy out of places in cities where there's a lot of people moving around and putting that energy into the buildings. Have you ever heard anything of that?
Wait, are you talking about geothermal energy?
No, the energy generated by people in subways and in congested areas.
Oh, I have not heard of that.
I heard something about that. I have a question of my own. It was brought to mind by something that was just said about batteries. How close are we, does anybody know, to this system where all of our car batteries are basically part of the of the grid, and so that people's houses and cars are connected to the grid and as a source of energy during during demand periods. In other words, using all of the car batteries and truck batteries as a resource for the grid during high demand periods.
Are you talking about exporting power from vehicle batteries back onto the grid? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yeah, that is the really cool sort of next frontier with EVs. So right now there's lots of pilot programs working on that. In Massachusetts, there's in Beverly, they've got electric school buses that during the summer participate in peak shaving moments where basically they sell electricity back onto the grid. In those like 10 summer days where it's been 95 degrees for 3 days in a row, everybody's got their air conditioning running. Those are the days where the demand for the whole year is the highest, and those are the days where we turn on old coal power plants or oil burning power plants to meet that really, really high demand. So they're participating in programs where instead of turning on another coal or oil powered plant, we can pull electricity from the batteries of those school buses, which are big. So there's a bunch of pilots like that with school buses or passenger vehicles. There's a lot of technological and regulatory questions that need to be answered before that's widespread. But I think it's a really promising space because it will help, particularly as the climate changes and the extremes get more extreme. It'll be another tool to help us weather those extremes.
A way of getting rid of the Northfield generating station, the Northfield Mountain system. You probably don't know about that, but it's a big issue out here. Anybody?
I'm curious about the trends in electric vehicle designs, whether, you know, I have a smaller SUV vehicle, and I understand they discontinued it because the trend was to larger ones. But is that going to continue, particularly now that China's got more EVs coming on the market?
So what dictates a trend is the consumer. So we're throwing everything that we can. For example, Honda and Kia, they're in partnership. They're sister companies. One's going for a more futuristic look. Honda went with the Chevy Colt look, or the old style look with their EV, to see which one will work. EV buyers are the most educated buyers, but they do dictate a lot on how we market a car, how we're going to sell that car. Right now, I took the EV9, which is the largest electric SUV on the market right now, just to see the head turn. And I didn't see a lot of it. It just looks like a regular SUV. You couldn't tell it was an EV unless you looked really hard. And that's what the trend's going for. We don't want to show that we're driving an EV. We want to show that we're driving a normal vehicle. And I think that's what the trend's going for. Personally, I'd like a Cybertruck. Just saying. As much as I don't like Elon Musk, I would like a Cybertruck. It's the future of trucks. It's the only
Unless you put a heavy ball in its window.
Yes, exactly. But hey, how often does that happen? Any other questions?
Anything further? No more questions?
I do have a statement to say, because we were asked about statements. The EV market, you guys, a lot of consumers think that there's a lot of money that we're selling these vehicles for. The vehicle I took, the difference between MSRP and invoice is $695. On an EV6, which is a sports car, is $325. No matter how I look at this, no matter how I sell this vehicle, I'm selling it at a loss to the dealership. I will sell all my EVs, I'll let them all off my lot. I'll I'll sell every last one of that invoice to get them off my lawn, because it just costs me money, costs the owners money. When Elon Musk dropped the price on his Teslas, it destroyed the EV market, because it took out the competitiveness, because we're all still trying to develop this technology to get to a lower price point. How can I compete with the Model 3 at $25,000 when my closest vehicle to it is at $45,000? You're gonna go with his brand. He controls the market, he controls how we get the energy, he controls a lot of it. He pretty much destroyed the EV market by himself by doing that, because there's no more competitiveness.
Yes, way in the back. See if we can get you the microphone.
One more?
We haven't talked at all about reliability of these vehicles.
Thank you. So
reliability.
I would sure like to know more about reliability, and if I buy one, what kind of problems am I likely to have?
As long as you don't hit something low on the ground, you're fine. That's how I describe it. The reliability of these vehicles are very, very high, but you have to remember, it's an aluminum casing covered with plastic. So, for example, if a stop sign's on the ground, you hit that stop sign, you're gonna crack something and it's gonna get totaled out. But your insurance company will cover that cost. That's why we have insurance. So reliability is good, as long as you don't hit anything with the vehicle.
That's a question.
DJ, and DJ is behind you, so maybe also behind.
So, one of the things that has always seemed apparent to me is we've been using more fossil fuels every year for a century. And no one seems to want to promote the idea that we should start using less energy in our lives, right? That maybe we need to think about living closer to where we work. Maybe we need to think about walking and bicycling more. That in fact, reducing carbon dioxide emissions is going to mean that every one of us has to take responsibility for using less energy. But that makes every one of us less wealthy because energy gives us convenience. And so I think that's a debate that the politicians don't want to confront.
No, I personally agree with you, Anna. He was talking about saving energy by changing lifestyles. And I often think about that. Supposing people just didn't travel so much. Supposing they just stayed in one place, basically all their lives, you know, and went on public transportation. And this whole idea of flying across the country twice a year or more that we take for granted is brand new in the human race, after all. People used to live in villages all their lives. And I'm not sure that a great deal of human happiness has been developed by allowing people to fly around the world. But that's more of a philosophic and non-technical idea, I guess. Yeah, there's another question.
So this is just my personal experience. I drove school buses for over 23 years. So you guys can start adding up the years. I've been a driver ed teacher. I was a driver ed school owner for 12 years. I have a lot of experience with ICE cars. In 2020, I bought a 2015 Nissan Leaf. I was loath to trade it in. Why? This was the most reliable vehicle I have ever owned. Never mind Kia, never mind Ford. I'm talking about my personal experience. I traded up for a 2020 Nissan Leaf. Why? Because of my experience that I had with my 15. Now, sure, I baby my vehicles. Sure, I educate myself. When I get into an ICE vehicle now, which is hardly ever, I drive so mindfully. I'm a much more mindful driver. That's why I'm happy to be here and hear about all these things that I don't normally think about. That was the most reliable car I ever owned. And when that car drove away, I went, oh. But there was nothing I could do. The range was low enough that, and I never lost battery range either in 2.5 years. Why? Because I know how to take care of these cars, at least in my opinion, in my environment. So I ended up just trading it in and thinking, oh no, oh no. That's how reliable that car was. It cost me nothing to run that car, virtually nothing. But you know, any vehicle can break down at any time. You know, it just can. So that's my two-sided issue. But I just feel better driving an all EV. I do.
I'm curious about maintenance, and this is probably, what are the maintenance costs for an EV? What is that actually covering?
Each brand does it differently, but
Anna, the question is about maintenance costs of EVs. The maintenance costs.
Maintenance cost, Anna?
so most brands do it differently. I've been selling cars a lot since the EVs have been coming out, just not the Kia, but for Jaguar, Land Rover, Toyota, Volvo, all those brands. There's one thing that's universal with the maintenance. Your first maintenance on that vehicle is at 2 years. And that is to check all the systems and functions of the vehicle, check the brakes, make sure the regen's working, rotate your tires. That's your first maintenance for the vehicle. I sell my EVs with a lifetime of 3 oil changes. Because you don't need them. That was a joke. There you go. Thank you. Congratulations. The moon's alive now. But that's the whole thing. If you're not having to worry about oil changes, tires, brakes, things like that, because of how the car's operating, it's peace of mind. That's the reason that people buy the EVs. Brian over has the solar ready. It's peace of mind. He just goes home, plugs it in, and says, oh, well, I'll take it in the morning. Peace of mind. That's the best thing. As a consumer, peace of mind is the best thing that you can have. When I sell a car, I try to always give it peace of mind. Fairfields, we always, whether you buy new or used vehicles, we're going to give you the first 2 services on us to make sure you have peace of mind. Because it makes you feel more comfortable. That's why there's a warranty, to make you feel comfortable. If you're buying a $60,000 car, don't you want to make sure someone's going to take care of it? Unlike Massachusetts that has the right to repair with their vehicles, the manufacturer will take care of it. You bought a brand new vehicle, bring it back to the guy that sold it to you.
Nate, I understand that you brought a car down for people to look at.
Yes,
Is it parked out here?
it is.
Well, when we're done, if anybody wants to see the newest and greatest,
I'll take you guys for a test drive. It'll be a short one because I need the range to get back to the charging station is. That was my word. But I will keep it on sport mode for you because I think I have enough to make it back.
speaking of sport mode, the great thing about EVs is the marvelous acceleration. You can beat practically any police car off